Nowadays, I work for Accord, which is part of the MHP group. I lead that work, helping people understand conflict and polarization. And we did some work asking people, which parties they like and which parties they dislike, and you measure the distance between them. That's a very common way to look at polarization. And one of the things that became quite obvious, people who were SNP supporters really, really liked the SNP, and people who weren't generally were a bit more ambivalent. There was quite a lot of hostility to the Tories, especially in Scotland. But one thing that stuck out to me when I went through the data literally yesterday was that people in England were surprisingly hostile to the SNP and quite disliked them. And some of that, you would expect people to feel ambivalent about a Scottish National Party if they are English as their identity, and the same in reverse. But what I wonder is if it opens up for the Conservatives a way that happened a bit in the 2015 election, where they drove out their core vote by making people feel threatened about, deals with the SNP in Scotland, particularly between Ed Miliband and the Labour Party. And that was a very successful strategy for them, because when people are threatened, they'll often respond in very instinctive ways. And, they will be like, what is safe? What can I feel? Where can I feel reassured? And, the Conservatives were able to position themselves as the Conservative Unionist Party and able to pick that up. And in light of some of the discussions around the Gender Recognition Act and what went on last week, I do wonder if there's a political element to this. People like Linton Crosby will be looking at some of the same stats that I am looking at. And if they're thinking, hang on, can I drive out my vote by picking an argument with the SNP, aside from the many constitutional elements of it and some of the stuff around, women's rights? Like, is there a political element to this? And I think the answer, it should be an undoubted yes. How strong a part that is of Rishi Sunak and other people's views is, something that they'll be able to talk, or is up for debate. But I think people would be right to consider that people might be playing into polarization when they're picking that argument. And that's, people sometimes, I should add an important caveat. Some polarization is a really good and healthy and normal thing. Like, voter choice matters, a distinction matters, robust debate matters. The problem is when it spills over significantly into other parts of life, if it makes people more likely to believe someone has they've committed a sexual assault or not, if it changes how you hire, if it changes who you live next to, like that becomes a really big problem with polarization. But some is really normal and healthy, and so is its ebbs and flows. So, it can be quite easy for people to take my words and be like, oh my God, the Conservatives, they're just deepening polarization with how they're approaching this. Well, there is undoubtedly a legitimate constitutional question to try and be settled within this as well. But do I think there'll be a fringe benefit of some political dividend for them? Yeah, I suspect they're hoping for it.